Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today we are talking about how to spot a toxic job before you accept it. So if you have ever taken on one of those jobs that looked great on paper and then turned out to be a nightmare, you are not alone. It is something that we see from clients. And so in this episode, we're going to be breaking down some of those red flags that if you know what to look for, can potentially signal that something maybe isn't quite right before you accept an offer. So Pam, this is completely in your world, isn't it, with your clients? So when you're working closely alongside people, they've got you in their corner to help them avoid this. What are some of the red flags that people need to look for before they start applying for roles?
Oh, this is such a good one, isn't it? Because this is the difference between getting that real dream job or just getting into a job and finding out that it just wasn't exactly what you thought. So I think one of the things that I've noticed is that companies will keep reposting a job ad. So when it's been reposted and you've seen it come up time and time again, this is where you can start asking yourself the question, why? If they are putting that job ad out and they're not getting the right people in for it, there's a reason. So there's either something that's not right in the job description or the job ad, or they don't really know what they want. So if they don't know what they want, that's going to be really difficult for you then to articulate how you can help them, what you can bring to the role. And if they are constantly reposting that ad, what you'll find is that they're just meeting more and more people to see what can someone else bring to the table and just add more things that they want into the mix. That's probably the first thing to look out for. And I suppose if you do see a job ad being reposted, give them a call and just find out more about the role. What are they looking for? What type of person are they looking for? What do they want? What do they want skill set wise? And you can get a better feel for it.
I think as well, it can be a case, and I'd be really interested in your take on this because we haven't discussed it before we started recording. But I notice as well with this that it can be that they're really unrealistic about what their budget can get them. So I work a lot with smaller and mid-sized companies, founder-led businesses, where potentially they're still stuck in however things were 2, 3, 4 years ago. And there's this expectation that this is my budget, this is what I can spend, this is what I want, this is what I need. And there's not always the sense checking of, do those things actually match?
Yeah, it is a hard one, isn't it? Because it's almost like when they start looking for the person that they want, usually there's a demand in the business, there's a gap in the business, and then it's almost like they go from, we've got this gap we need to fill, or we need to bring a great person on board to move us forward in some way. And then all of a sudden they just go crazy with the job spec, don't they? And start adding in all kinds of stuff. And we may as well just put everything on there, because then nobody can ever say that wasn't in my job description.
And that's a sign, I think, then culturally within businesses, if that is common practice to put everything in there so that you can't say it's not in my job description, then you have to wonder what happens within those businesses that people are saying that's not in my job description. Who are the people that are there who are saying that? What are the expectations being placed on people? So it's funny how all these things link to each other. And what else then, in terms of job descriptions, what else might people be able to pick up on from reading ads or reading job descriptions that could be a red flag and make somebody question, do I want to apply or not?
So you probably got two things really, like two real key things to look out for. So you've got the job descriptions that are super vague, that don't really tell you anything. So then you're left guessing, what do they really need or want? And then you've got the job descriptions that, like we've just said, lists absolutely everything under the sun. And it's get as much stuff as we can in here because we either want the most value for money or we just want to make sure that nobody can ever say in the future, that's not part of my job. So it's a hard one, really, because when you're in that situation and when you're job searching and you might spot a role within a company that you like the look of, and then you look at the job description and you think, oh, I don't really know. It's good to question it and maybe even ask them for more information while you're working through those questions in your head. You can always ask them multiple questions. You don't just need to ask them everything at once. You can work through it. You can think about it. You can find out what they want, what they need, and then you can add that into your application. But I think if it is particularly vague or it is particularly busy, you've got to ask yourself again, apart from what do they want, what is going on inside that organization? Like, why don't they know what they want? Why can't they articulate that? Sometimes it could be because it's a brand new role. Sometimes it could be because somebody's left and they've got absolutely no idea what that person really did or actually what they really need. So I do think with that, when you see that, there are some real red flags that you should take notice of. So rather than getting all consumed with the job searching process and be in that mode where you're like, I just need to get an interview, I just need to get a job offer, it's look out for these red flags and question them, because you might question them and get a really good answer. And it's just actually because they're doing recruitment in a rush. They just could be inexperienced with doing recruitment. There could be a whole range of things and they could be a great company to work for. But that due diligence, I think, is super important and it can tell a lot before you even get to the interview. And I know it's tough getting rejected from processes or being disappointed that you can't move forward in a process. But honestly, it will save you so much heartache in the future if you get the information that you need, not just about the job, but what is going on inside the organization and getting a feel for the culture as well.
Yeah, it's listening as you're describing it, that aspect of sometimes the internal teams are not as experienced in recruitment. And what I've seen is this question of, does anyone have a job description for this? And I've seen that asked in communities that I'm a part of where people will say, has anybody got a job description? And I think with the use of AI being so prevalent now, a lot of these job descriptions are written by asking ChatGPT or a similar tool, create me a job description for this. And if the person that is putting that ad out there doesn't understand enough about the role, they don't have that capacity to sense check. Whereas if you're working in that function and that's the type of role that you're looking to apply for, then you're looking at that and you're spotting that it doesn't make sense, but they maybe didn't have that. And that's not always a red flag. But like you say, it's then the due diligence. So what about things like Glassdoor and employer reviews? Do you encourage clients to look at those before they make applications, or does that come further through the process?
I mean, I think you should definitely have a look at it and see what people are saying, but just bear in mind that it's only usually people that have had a bad experience that post on those kinds of places. You do get the odd positive review as well, but it's always good to look into it just to see what is going on, what are people actually saying, because then that might help with the questions that you ask at the interview to find out more about the company culture once you get in front of them.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, Glassdoor is something that I take with a pinch of salt. And I think where it can be useful is to look at what themes are there, what things come up time and time again. But like you say, I think often people, disgruntled ex-employees, will use that as a way of lashing out once they've left and feeling that they can say something that maybe they couldn't say while they were still there. And so I think you have to read into and put some balance around that and take it as, okay, What can I see in terms of themes? And also, the bigger the company, people's experience can be so different in different functions or different areas. So you can't necessarily assume that what somebody experienced in a different role or a different part of the organization would apply to the role that you're applying for, can you?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because sometimes what's toxic to one person is a great space for someone else. And I think it does just come down to like personalities, how you set boundaries, all of that kind of stuff. So it's definitely worth knowing what you're getting yourself in for, because if you go in with your eyes wide open, you're only going to be able to use that to your advantage. And you can make your own decision once you get there. Obviously, if there's some really bad stuff, you probably want to do a bit more investigation, but generally take it with a pinch of salt, but use it to maybe inform interview questions, or once you get into the organization, like how you conduct yourself once you're there.
So let's talk a bit further through then. So once somebody has completed an application, what are some of the red flags that might come up at that point as somebody gets into a recruitment process? So either when they're being invited to interview or through that kind of interview or recruitment process, what are the things there that people should be alert to and consider? Is that telling me?
So probably like the top things to think about would be like a disorganized interview process. So that's often a sign that the company is chaotic and completely disorganized. And if organization is really important to you, that could be something to think about before you get there. And then maybe things like them dodging questions about why the role is open. So when you're talking to them about how has this vacancy come about, and maybe you're getting different answers, maybe they're just completely dodging it altogether. It's what's going on here. It's always good to just, I think the awareness in the recruitment process is so key, because don't take things for granted in the process that they've got your best interest at heart, or that the information that they're given to you is the only information that's available. Question everything and think about what's going to be important to you and what do you need to know.
Yeah, I think one of the things we often say, don't we, to our clients is if they don't treat you well when you're a candidate, then are they going to treat you well when you're an employee? So if people are disorganized, if they don't have respect for decent communication, coming back to people, all of those real kind of fundamentals. And I know I sometimes go on a rant about this where I'm like, I was recruited in the 90s where I used to have to go in and do a mail merge and use the printer in the morning before anybody else came into the office so that I could send invite letters and rejection letters because we replied to everybody. And now somebody can just press a button and send a message to everybody, and that still people get ghosted. So that for me is a real bugbear, that with all the advances in technology, there are still organizations that don't take the time to treat candidates well. And so for me, that if they don't understand that you as a valuable candidate, because presumably what they want is valuable candidates, if they don't understand that you're comparing them to other organizations, other processes, and you're forming judgments as well, then I think that can signal what their approach might be if you were to actually be an employee.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And I just say, with the advances in technology, like you would expect at least an automated rejection email just so that where you stand with that organization. But people are just left hanging, aren't they, literally for weeks and weeks on end. And if you're applying for multiple roles, that can be quite difficult and it can really knock people's confidence as well. But I think some of the other things that you can think about as well is when you do get a chance to speak to them, or just from what you can glean from the job description, if they're expecting like really long hours. Like I've seen some job descriptions lately with 40 hours or 45-hour weeks, and it's wow, that's a lot of hours, isn't it? Is that really necessary? And then it's 45 hours in the office, and it's again, is that necessary? So I think it's also worth thinking about, are the other team members working in this way? Like, how are they feeling? Are they heading for burnout, or is this just standard practice within this organization? Is this what I want for myself? Those type of things are usually hard to negotiate if everybody else is working 40, to 50 hours a week in the office, Monday to Friday, it's going to be really difficult for you to negotiate anything different. So there are things that you can also find out and think about whether that's right for you or not.
I think it's that old thing, isn't it? When somebody tells you who they are, listen to them. And it's the same with organizations when they're recruiting, when you notice these signs. Because that's the thing. If you see something in an ad or you have that conversation, and it's some of those phrases as well of we're looking for someone to hit the ground running, we're really pacey. And what they actually mean is we're chaotic and disorganized and we don't know what we want. So I think it's that sense of if they're saying 45 hours in the office, that the reality is that what they're expecting is more than that, but legally they can't put anything more than that in the ad. So it's that being willing to read and interpret and pick a balanced picture of all of this evidence that you're gleaning through the process, but be willing to notice these signs and don't be in that place where any job, like so many of our career coaching clients come to us because they've recognized a pattern in their career of I didn't move to a job that I wanted, I moved away from a job that I didn't want. And actually what I've realized when I look back on my career is I've seen this pattern of that I've gone from the frying pan into the fire, or I've gone to things that didn't serve me because I wanted to get away. So I think it's understandable that when you don't want to be where you are, you can almost override your spidey senses, can't you?
Yeah. I think it's mad the way it's like there's something that's inside your brain that once you get into the recruitment process, you can almost like discount and suppress. And like it's almost like that whack-a-mole game where you're just like whacking down all of these red flags that keep popping up. But it's once you're in the process, you've just got your eye on the prize. So it can be quite difficult to step back from that. And one of my clients recently, we were thinking about we got into the conversation around the culture and will it be right for her. So I said to her, ask in the next interview what kinds of person would thrive in this role. And they were like, oh, that's a great question. Somebody who's going to roll the sleeves up, somebody who's going to get stuck in, somebody who doesn't have to leave bang on 5 o'clock, somebody who's willing to put the effort in and do all of this stuff. And they were so passionate with the answer. And she was like, oh, brilliant, thanks. And then she came out of that interview and she did get to the next stage. But she said to me, I'm not going any further because it was clear that they want a whole lot more than I'm willing to give in that role. And she said the way that she delivered the type of person that would really thrive in that role, she said she did it with such passion. She said that was almost like drawn into it. And I was thinking, I would roll my sleeves up, I would do this. And then she was like, but do I want to at this level in my career? Do I want to be heading for burnout by the end of the probation period? Absolutely not.
And I think that really goes to illustrate that point you were saying of what's a red flag for one person might not be for somebody else. Because for me, hearing that description of this is the kind of person, I definitely know that there was times in my career where that would absolutely have been me. And I would have really felt, yes, that is me they're describing. I could slot in here. I'm hearing myself in that description. And so it's not that it's right or wrong. It's just that it's a red flag or not for you, depending upon whether you are that type of person. So having that insight and asking that question is not saying that the whole thing is a terrible environment to be. But if you have that clarity, then you can be honest with yourself of, is that me? Is that what I want?
Yeah, because I suppose if it's not, that could feel really toxic to you. It makes sense to ask that question up front and get that information. And I suppose it's the same with the other questions that we talked about as well, like things like what do the successful people here have in common, or how does the company handle mistakes? Like they're also really key questions, aren't they, to find out how that interviewer reacts to that, how they answer that, and thinking about the answer that they actually provide to you in that moment. That's key information, isn't it?
It really is. What about our pet topic then of during the recruitment process with normally presentations, but almost interview stroke recruitment tasks more broadly, and what people ask or not, what might be the red flags within that part of recruitment?
With that, we see this so often, don't we? And we have loads of little rants around this because we see lots of companies taking advantage of candidates. They want a full marketing plan, they want a sales strategy, they want war and peace in the interview. And is this necessary? What are you trying to find out from these candidates, or do you just want a bit of like free consultancy from these people? So I think you almost have to judge it and think about how much you're willing to do, because if it's going to take you 4 or 5 hours to create a presentation that details a complete marketing plan, then is this role really worth it to you? And sometimes you might make the decision that it is worth doing, but we would always say, like, approach that with caution, because why do they need so much at this stage? Because if they are going to the nth degree to understand every last little detail, why is that? Is it because they don't really know what they want, that they're just trying to get the most amount of value from someone that they can get? What is going on? I would also be thinking about why they want to do that, why they need that information.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to, if they don't respect you as a candidate, are they going to respect you as an employee? So if they think it's okay to ask for someone that's not been offered a role to spend hours and hours researching and coming up with the content and rehearsing the presentation and delivering it, and they're asking that of multiple candidates, then that for me just indicates that they haven't got the balance right in terms of how they operate and how they think about candidates. And we did a whole episode on interview presentation and on ensuring that you can simplify that. So we'll link to that in the show notes, and also to our resource on how to prepare for a presentation so that you can nail it. And the whole point of that is, I think sometimes people feel like they've got to go into the weeds and do lots and lots. But when we unpick it with people, actually, it isn't always the case that you need to do everything that you think you need to do. So sometimes it's about recognizing and understanding, what do they want from that recruitment task? What do they need to see? And asking yourself that question of, how can I demonstrate that without feeling like you've got to go and do hours and hours of unpaid work just to be able to show up?
Yeah, and I think once you start asking those questions, or once you start digging a little bit deeper into it, it does help, doesn't it? And it helps you move through that process and understand that information. And I suppose the next stage to all of this is the offer stage. So you get through that initial part, you get selected for the interview, you go for the interview, and then you get the offer. And that's the bit, isn't it, where it's, you've made it, you've done it, but is it right? And I think a lot of the time you do have a gut feeling, don't you, as to whether it's right. Like, you've gone through the process and you might have squashed down a few of those red flags, and you might be thinking, oh, I still want the offer though, because that's like, everybody wants to get the offer. Nobody wants to be rejected from a process. But when you get to that offer stage, it's, now I've got it. That's what I wanted. But do I actually want it? Or am I willing to walk away because this job isn't going to tick the boxes? These people are not going to support my growth.
And I think some of the stuff here that can be a red flag is often about their approach as well. So sometimes you can get what seems like a really great offer. They're really free and easy with the budget when it comes to salary. But then again, if some of that earlier stuff has indicated that their expectations are really high, are they doing that because then effectively they feel like they're going to get their pound of flesh by offering you a really high salary? And it can also be things like, is there any indication of how that career path could pan out, or what happens beyond this initial job that might not matter to one person? But if you're someone who is in the stage of your career where your career path and career development is important to you, then you're not just accepting the offer on the basis of, is this package right for me now? You're accepting an offer or turning it down on the basis of, does this fit with where I want to take my career? Does this role create a foundation for the next thing I want in my career? So again, that might not be an indication of it being a toxic environment, but it just might not be right for you.
Yeah. And I think when you're thinking about that offer and whether you want to accept that, I think for me, the biggest red flag is when they're really pushing you to accept it like straight away and they're not going to give you time to think about it. And they're not even going to send you the contract before you have a chance to think about it, to review the contract and then come back to them with an answer. And I think that is the bit for me where when that happens with my clients, I'm like, whoa, hold up. You don't need to give them an answer straight away. Are they going to send the contract over? What are the terms? And sometimes some companies don't always send the contract, but at the minimum, you could probably tell us from a HR perspective, but I always expect at least a detailed offer letter, if not the full contract, before somebody's expected to make a decision and give them an answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, you should not, as an employer, you should not be expecting somebody to feel under pressure to accept an offer. You should expect that they can consider it, they can ask whatever questions they need. Because again, if you're a responsible employer, you want it to work both ways round. You want this to be the right candidate. You want them to be delighted to accept and feel like, yes, this is a great thing. And we're both going to be really pleased with that decision. And I think along similar lines, the biggest red flag for me is when organizations put you under pressure to reduce your notice to your existing employer. Now, I will often say to candidates, effectively, if you absolutely hate where you are and you've got an offer for a dream role and you want to go sooner, there's often very little that your employer can do if you don't fulfill your contractual notice period. But from a perspective of being a professional and from maintaining relationships and not burning bridges, if that's the case, you can often have an adult conversation with your existing employer and negotiate and agree a slightly shorter notice period or using accrued holiday as part of your notice period. So for your new employer to be putting you under pressure to not fulfill your contractual obligations to your existing employer, that for me is more red flags than a bunting factory. That is mental.
The funny thing is with that though, I suppose once you're in that situation and you've got the offer and they're putting the pressure on, and I suppose the first thing that you're thinking of is, what if they pull that offer back? What am I going to do then? Because then I'm going to lose it. And you go on this downward spiral, don't you? So I think basically what we're saying is if something feels off, don't ignore it. Explore it really. And if your gut is picking up on things that maybe your brain hasn't fully registered because you're being so caught up in the moment, then it's just time to take a moment, and you can quite happily ask them to give you some time to think about it, 24 hours, 48 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. And you can then take that time to really think about it, even write a pros and cons list and all of that kind of stuff to make sure it's right for you. Find out if there's anything else you want to ask them before you make the decision. And I think sometimes you might find that some of the red flags that come up are not necessarily deal breakers. So you might still want to proceed. So what I'd say is don't bury your head in the sand. Get it all out in the open and then make a call on it. And it's okay. If you go in with your eyes open, you can deal with that, can't you?
Yeah. And I think for me, if I were to summarize from the conversation that we've had, I think a big part of it is listen to your instinct and consider how they are treating you as a candidate and take that as a sign. If they were to continue to treat you with those values, with those approaches as an employee, is that going to feel okay for you? And then the other thing for me is it's really key to get a sense of the relationship that you would have with that hiring manager. And so one that we didn't really talk about as we went through it, but that happens sometimes, is you sometimes find that you're not actually being interviewed by the person you're going to report to. And for me, I would always, as a candidate, want to make sure that I had that connection, that sense of, yeah, I feel like I can work with this person, because if there's one person who is really going to impact on your day-to-day experience, it's your boss. And so if you've not either had the opportunity to have time with the person that's going to be line managing you, or you've had that opportunity and you've got questions that have not yet been answered, or it feels like it might not be a great match, then listen to that, really make sure that you explore that before, like you say, explore it, don't ignore it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is like a perfect summary for this episode.
So what quick wins would you say are the kind of key ones then from this episode? If people are in job search mode, what are the key things that they can take on board from this episode for the next role that they're looking to apply for?
So I think that the key things are just going to be to keep your wits about you, really. Have a look into things. If something looks a bit off, it usually is. Ask questions. It's absolutely fine to ask questions. They always say, or it's a known thing, that an interview should be a two-way process. It's not a two-way process unless you make it a two-way process. So it's one of those things where it's about thinking about what your needs are, what you would like to see from a role, what you need to hear from that organization to know that it's the right next step for you. And just to, as we say, just explore everything, question everything, and just make sure that it is the right move for you. And it's absolutely fine to reject an offer. You don't, just because you get the offer doesn't mean you need to accept it. And when I say that to people, they like gasp, my goodness, but like, how could you turn down an offer? If it's not right for you, it's absolutely fine to turn it down. There will be other offers.
Yeah, love that advice. And if you're listening to this and know that you are in job search mode and that maybe spotting those red flags or being willing to listen to your instinct and be brave enough to walk away if it's not right might be a challenge, then please do get in touch with Pam. So her job search accelerator and her job search coaching is absolutely perfect for that type of scenario, for supporting you to ensure that the roles that you are applying for and that you get selected for are going to be a great match, and also for that support with negotiating and ensuring you get the package that makes it feel like a natural yes rather than something that you can wonder about in the future. So as ever, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. And if there are topics that you want us to cover, then please do get in touch. Let us know what those are. And we'll be back next week. Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.